We finally do a mailbag show. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, December 18th, 2023. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Alrighty, well, welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. We are, of course, finally getting around to answering your questions from last Wednesday's show in regards to the mailbag. Now, we got a boatload of questions, so we may have enough to do the next 2 episodes. We're down to 3 episodes a week, as we've made clear. So we may have enough questions to tackle all of them this episode and Wednesday. Obviously, if any moves happen, then that will take priority. And then we have a lot of offseason left, so we'll have plenty of time to get through as many as possible. What other news and notes do I have? Jack Flaherty. I was told by a plethora of people, my favorite word, told by a lot of people, by almost all of you on Friday's show, that I was putting far too much emphasis on the H in his last name. So Jack Flaherty, thanks for keeping me honest, everybody, as always. So doesn't change my opinion of what I said, but that is something that I wanted to point out. I don't like mispronouncing names and everything, so that's completely my fault. But thank you for pointing that out. Anything else? I don't think so. Let's just get into it. Okay, we got a boatload of questions to get over. Let's start with, we got about probably 90% of our questions, I would say, are from YouTube, and I appreciate you all so much, because it takes a lot of the weight off of my shoulders in the offseason when trying to think of like what to talk about from episode to episode. And this has been a pretty eventful offseason. It's been, it's been great. But it's nice to know that if I ever do need a fallback, that you guys are always there to provide some questions and some conversations, because I think there's a lot of really, really good conversations to be had here. I also just want this to be as close. I want it to be informative, obviously, and I want it to be a good listen and whatnot. But I really want the general vibe of this to just be like you and a friend, like talking crap and shooting the stuff and just talking ball. And so I think that this as well, using your questions and your ideas, is a great way to kind of make that concrete as well. So I appreciate all of you greatly. Let's get into to some of these questions. Okay, from Detroit Diesel 89, we have, if you could make one major upgrade to Comerica Park, what would it be? I love Comerica Park. That is genuinely my favorite place on the planet. And they're making upgrades. That was something that happened over the weekend. So actually good timing there, kind of leans into Comerica Park. It was announced over the weekend, would make a lot of upgrades. The biggest one being the scoreboard is now going to be completely digital. That entire scoreboard in left field is going to be all digital. So we'll see how that looks when it's all said and done. And then the audio system is going to be fixed throughout the ballpark. It's been needing an upgrade for a while. And then all the TVs around the ballpark will be getting an upgrade, which has been very much needed. Those TVs barely work and haven't really worked since I was in middle school. So that is all awesome stuff. 2 thumbs up. Obviously, everybody just wants players. I understand that, but it's nice to improve the game day experience as well for whatever that is worth to you. My upgrade would genuinely just be the center field wall. I think it is the ugliest thing I've ever seen, that the old wall is just right behind the new wall. The new wall was just slapped in front of the old one, and they were like, yeah, that works. And we were told it wasn't a long-term thing last season, so I'm hoping that is true. But that is easily, it's not even close. I don't have too many things. Comerica is where I feel at home. I don't have too many things I'd change majorly, but that is certainly one. I think it looks tacky. I think it screams just like cheap and lazy. I can't stand it. It bothers me to no end. So that is easily the biggest upgrade I would make to Comerica Park. The next one is from Night Owl. We have, if somebody would have told you on the last day of the season that we'd be losing Miggy and Erod and replacing them with Mark Canna and Kenta Maeda, would you view this as a successful offseason plan? Obviously, this comment was from 4 days ago, so that is pre-Jack Flaherty signing. So we can kind of, I would assume it's okay. We can throw him into that conversation as well. This offseason, a lot of the questions were not a lot of them. We got several that were down this similar train of thought, like how successful of an offseason is this? Is this a good offseason, a bad one? Are you happy, upset with it? It's very tough. It's very difficult to walk the line here because this is objectively a weak free agent class for hitters. We've known that. We've been talking about that I feel like I've said it every single episode since like last offseason that this offseason was going to be really, really poor when it came to improving offense. And the Tigers bring in Mark Canna, and the other upgrades they make are all on the pitching side of things. I think the offseason's not over yet, and I know that you know that as well. Your question was as it stands right now, but I have a little, I don't want to call it like faith, but I do feel like that we're like a move away. I feel like that we got one move kind of up the sleeve still, just based on what we've been kind of setting ourselves up for. But I think that if I was to just say, like, has this offseason been a success or not? I don't know if I'd call it successful, but I wouldn't call it unsuccessful. I certainly wouldn't call it a failure. The Tigers, I believe Jeff Passan tweeted out the how much every team has spent this offseason. The Tigers are 8th. Tigers, I believe, have spent the 8th most in baseball this offseason. So it's not nothing. Now, it's $45 million. It's not like they've gone out and spent 800 mil or anything like that. But, and like the Yankees haven't spent a dime, but like they traded for Juan Soto. So like that's not really like a super, if you just spend more, you're having a better offseason. But they haven't done nothing. There is like a misconception, like, oh, the Tigers just like aren't doing anything. The Tigers have actually been one of the more active teams. It's just not like huge, giant, flashy, earth-shattering moves. And I know everybody wants that, and I want it too. So I'm in a boat where if I also think that a big factor in this, I'm probably way over explaining this question. I apologize, but there's so many factors in it. Like, I also feel like because the AL Central is A, so up for grabs, and B, nobody else outside of the Royals is doing anything in the division, that like you have, if you were just a little bit more aggressive, and again, there's still some offseason to go, you could kind of put yourself in a position where we could be talking about, is the AL Central on the table on opening day? Like that is somewhat feasible because of how little everyone else is doing. So I really struggle with like one exact word to describe how I feel about this offseason. I feel like my head's kind of spinning and running a million different directions with like, how do I view if the offseason ended today? How would I view it? What would I grade it type of thing? I like all the moves in a vacuum. I don't know what a vacuum is. I like all the moves in a vacuum. I like adding Kenta Maeda. I like adding Mark Canna. I'm fine with Flaherty, right? We broke that down on Friday. I'm fine with Flaherty. Was there better options out there? I think probably so, but I have no issues with Flaherty. Like, it's just the big picture part of it that the conversation comes into. Each individual move versus big picture, very different. I don't even know if I just answered that question, but that's kind of like how I feel about the offseason is that there's a lot of different feelings. If you were to call it underwhelming, I wouldn't disagree with you. But I also, again, in a vacuum, I like Chafin. Like I like all the moves they've made in a vacuum as well. Take a drink every time I say vacuum. Okay, let's keep the ball rolling here. We got a lot more questions to go over. Like I said, we'll get through as many as we can today, and then we will obviously continue answering. If there's a lot of big ones that we don't cover really today, we can continue that on Wednesday. All right, we'll do that right after I tell you all about our friends over at FanDuel. Score early this NFL season. I know it's very cold outside. It's the middle of the winter, but the deals stay hot with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. This is an absolutely electric time in the NFL season, right? Sunday was wild. We had a great Lions game on Saturday. We have college football bowl season. This is peak football, right? The next month and a half, 2 months is peak football. So get in on all the action with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. I appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Wednesday, continuing to ask all of your fantastic questions, have some very interesting conversations. I really, really like the questions we got. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, which is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Okay, let's keep the ball rolling here. We have ultimately, which corner outfield position do you think better suits Riley Greene long-term and why? This is from user and then a bunch of letters and numbers on YouTube. So I think that I'm pretty sure a commenter, Old Man Louder on YouTube, I think answered it pretty darn well. Due to the shape and size of Comerica, I think he'd be better suited to play left. I agree with that, but I do think it's important to add on to that as well, that when AJ Hinch says he's going to play matchups, that does not strictly mean offensively. So I think, and this is something that Cody Stavenhagen of The Athletic brought up a while ago. This is probably 6+ months ago now, is that, Riley is going to be in an interesting position where in Comerica, it probably makes more sense for him to play left, right? There's a little more spacious, especially that out-of-ton scoreboard, like Triples Alley got cut significantly. I think it probably makes sense for him to play left in Comerica, but you go to a stadium like Fenway and right field is much more spacious, then maybe he plays right in stadiums like that. I think that we're going to play matchups offensively, defensively, within the lineup, etc. And I think that that's another situation where you could see a lot of movement in the outfield depending on where the Tigers play as well. But I think at home games, left field is probably a reasonably safe bet. Let's see. Has there been any word on Riley Greene's recovery? From Jacob Holmes on YouTube. So I feel like I said Twitter on the last one. All of these are from YouTube so far. So I haven't heard anything that the public hasn't heard. He's posting a lot of videos of him working out and stuff. I'm assuming that means that he's going to plan. I'm really interested in spring training, and a lot of people are worried about the defense. I'm really not freaked out about the defense very much, because it's his non-throwing arm. That's so important to remember. This is not his left arm. This is a contact-caused Tommy John in his right arm. So will he DH early on to kind of protect him? Yes. But when he's ready to go back in the field, I'm not going to be oh my goodness, every throw I'm holding my breath. No, it was in the other arm. So I'm much more, I don't want to use the word worried, but I'm much more paying attention to how the surgery affects his swing than anything else. Obviously, a lot of the value Riley Greene brings is going to come from that swing that he has. And so that is my biggest area that I'm looking for in spring training. The defense, whatever, it'll happen when it happens. When they're comfortable putting him out there, they will. But I'm really not too terribly concerned about his defensive long-term standing, at least in regards to the Tommy John. Obviously, he needs to just stay healthy in general. Okay, this one is from T1 on YouTube. What third baseman would you want in free agency? We've talked about this. We've talked about third base quite a bit. Matt Chapman's still out there. There are serious concerns I have with Matt Chapman. Would I be fine with it because he's a massive upgrade over what we have currently? Yes. Okay. I wouldn't complain, but there's a lot of concerns about Matt Chapman. A lot of concerns. Jamer's gone. Justin Turner probably isn't a third baseman anymore. Okay, so after that, you're already up to Gio Urshela, Josh Donaldson, Evan Longoria, Eduardo Escobar, Brian Anderson, Gene Segura. I'm not really chomping at the bit to bring any of those guys in. I don't think those are like clear and concise upgrades over the situation that you would have there, right? I don't know, man. I really I've been very vocal about it. I'm totally fine if they trade a pitcher for a third baseman. I'm pretty fine with that. I don't know if there is a clear cut, bona fide, this is the option free agency wise at third base. I really don't. Next one is from Rick on YouTube. I know you believe Manning might be traded. Do you see the Tigers trading Olsen or Gibson Long? Certainly on the table. And I don't mean like they're actively trading him. There's a difference between being on the table and like they're not actively trying to trade Reese Olsen. They're not trying to get rid of him. They're not trying to get rid of Sawyer Gibson Long. I don't want that to get misconstrued. However, Matt Manning's peripherals are terrible. Like, he doesn't strike people out. He really, his only good pitch is a fastball, and it goes 93 miles an hour. He gets out. He has had a low ERA the last 2 years. I'm fine if they keep Manning and they think that they can get some more out of him. I just don't know how much of like a trade piece darling Manning is going to be either. How good of a player could you get for Matt Manning or Matt Manning and Akil Badu, right? Like, Akil Badu batted like 215 or 220 or whatever it was last year. Like, these are players that if you keep, you will be keeping, hoping that they continue to develop and get better, not that they stay the same. And so when it comes to other pitchers that are like Wilmer Flores, I think is very much like on the table. I think that's a possibility. I think pretty much anybody is really like somewhat a possibility if they really want to be aggressive in improving the offense. And like fan bases, and I'm guilty of it. Like, all fan bases are guilty of it. Have a tendency to overvalue their own players, right? Matt Manning is not going to bring in some like all-star caliber third baseman with 5 years of control. Okay. Like, it's not going to happen. Manning and Badu like aren't going to bring a high-end third baseman in, right? So I think that if you got to spend money to make money, baby. And like, if you want a better player, you are going to have to give up a more valuable pitcher. And I think they're in a position right now where they are so much deeper at starting pitcher that is somewhat, I don't want to say a luxury that they have, but kind of a luxury that they have in terms of options. All of these guys can be options, and they'll see which one they're most comfortable pulling the trigger on, if any. Again, we talked about it on Friday. A lot of people were upset with like my comments on Friday and were like, oh, like, why are you advocating to trade people? We need innings. I tried to make it as clear as I could. I think that they might just hold on to everybody. And I'm fine with that because I've been advocating for them to get starting pitching depth forever because people get hurt all the time. But we will see. They have options now, which is a very good place to be at. Okay. Also, I have gotten so many questions over the next, so many in this like mailbag, just like tweeted at me over the last couple of weeks about like Trevor Bauer. And it's a fair question for starters, very fair question. His market is just completely unknown. And that's why I wasn't going to spend half an hour talking about someone that I have no clue what their market is. I don't know if like there's some reports from like anonymous people in front offices that there's general managers out there that are like, I would be shocked if anybody signed him. And then there's other reports, conflicting reports that are like, well, I think that he could have 4 or 5 suitors. I have no clue. This has been such a tight-lipped, like hush-hush situation ever since it was announced that he was going to like try to play in MLB again. And like, he served his suspension, obviously. So I have no idea. All I can tell you is from the Tigers' perspective at this point, I can't imagine the Tigers are in on it. Are in on him rather. Like, I can't, after Flaherty, especially, they are like, Bauer's going to probably get a 1-year deal if he does get a deal, which again, I don't know. But if he does get a deal, I would imagine it's a 1-year kind of prove it deal so that he can be a free agent again next year and quote unquote prove that he can still pitch in Major League Baseball. I can't imagine that the Tigers are going to be in business for like yet another 1 or 2 year like short-term veteran starting pitching like option. They've already signed multiple, and we already have been talking about how deep their rotation is as it stands right now. Nonetheless, throwing another one in there, so it's like I don't think they're in the market. I mean, we talked about this on Friday. I don't think they're in the market for any like short-term veterans anymore on starting pitching market. It would surprise me if they brought in anybody, right? Like speculation and polarization, whatever you want to call it, not even included in that conversation. I don't think they're going to be in the starting pitching more. So I get so many questions about like, are the Tigers going to sign Trevor Bauer? Should they get him, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's probably safe to say after Flaherty that that's not going to happen. And like obviously, if there is a market and it heats up for him, we can have the conversation again. But just like right now, I don't know what kind of market he has, and on top of that, I don't think the Tigers are players in that market whatsoever. So I'm not going to like talk about it very often. That's all. Okay, cool. So very fair question. Didn't mean to like kick the can down the road or avoid talking about it. We just had other stuff to talk about at that time. And now we have a mailbag, so I have a chance to answer all the questions I've been getting for the last couple of weeks. So here we are. Okay, let's keep the ball rolling. We have a lot more to get to. Again, we'll have some conversations today, and then we'll finish up on Wednesday's show. All right, we will do that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate you all for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. Keeping the ball rolling here. I feel like that's like my favorite expression lately. I've been saying that a lot. Let's see. From Tony Chasey. Here's a mailbag question for you. You mentioned that the Tigers have been very transparent about their contracts in this new regime. Well, then, why is it that the details of Hinch's contracts are never explained or divulged to the public? And why aren't Hinch's coaches allowed to talk to the media? Two fascinating questions, Tony. I like these ones a lot. So, for starters, we'll talk about the coaching contract thing. That is common practice. That's like not just a Tigers thing. And I think it's stupid too. But baseball is, I don't know if it's like a respect thing or an old timey thing or what it is, but baseball does not, like very, very rarely, like next to never, are coaches' contracts like public. You'll be lucky if you get the years out of it, and you almost never get the salary out of it. And Hinch's contract, we know to an extent. We learned that his previous contract went through 2025, and this is an extension, and I can't imagine it's a 1-year extension. So I would imagine he is going to be penciled in or penned in to be the Tigers manager for the next, my guess right now is at least 5 years, but obviously only time will tell. But that is just a baseball thing. Even the teams that are very vocal about player contracts and do the public thing, just like the Braves do it, and the Braves do it to a crazy extent. But that is very much just like a baseball thing. Manager contract stuff usually isn't public. Usually, there's some exceptions, but usually. Now, when it comes to why can't Hinch's coaches talk to the media, that is an AJ Hinch rule, and it has been his entire Tigers tenure. I don't know him well enough. I don't know him at all. He doesn't know who I am, etc. But I don't know him, like his background well enough is what I was trying to say, to know if this was a thing in Houston. I have no clue. I don't know if this was something that he carried throughout the Astros era, or if this was a side effect of the sign stealing thing. I don't know. Somebody may know the answer to that. I am not the one, but that has been a thing for at least his entire Tigers tenure. Is he does not let his assistant coaches, or his coaches, I should just say, talk to the media. And there's some Detroit-based media people that really get bothered by that and would really like to talk to these guys on the record and just can't. And it's very frustrating for some people. So you're not alone in noticing. And if you're frustrated by it, you're certainly not alone in that. There's plenty of people that share that sentiment. Okay. Next one is from Bob on YouTube. Nobody ever talks about Bigby as a future prospect, and it seems there's no room in the outfield for him. What do you see as a short-term and long-term plan for him? fascinating conversation, I think, around Justice Bigbie. First off, great dude, great baseball mind. We did an interview with him probably a month ago, maybe a little bit longer. So please go check that out because he is such a fascinating interview. He does a great job just really talking about like all the ins and outs and what he focuses on when he plays and whatnot. Very, very cool guy. So the biggest thing, and somebody replied to this as well, and this has been my take for all prospects. If they can hit, they will at the major league level, your team will find room for you, right? Hitting is too valuable to just like ignore if you can do it. And so that's my first and foremost. If he continues to rake, they're going to have to figure something out. He talked to us in the interview a little bit about like the positional versatility and trying to find different positions so that he could be a little bit more versatile at the next level. I think I don't want to say like he's a trade piece, right? Because he's not a super highly regarded prospect still. He just had a really, really good 2023. And I think if he has another really good offensive season this year, especially in AAA, then he will get a lot more kind of national attention in prospect ranks. So I think short term, it's pretty easy. You just put him in Toledo and see how he does. You need a close to a full year of Toledo this year. Long term, if he rakes this year and even like the start of next year in AAA, you're going to have to figure out something. And you kind of have a log jam in corner outfield as it is. So you're going to have to do something. And you have a lot of options there, either trade him or trade someone in front of him. But I think that's kind of we don't want to spend too much time talking about that until he hits in AAA all year this year. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not trying to like screw you out of an answer here or like, not be direct, but I truly think that this organization is thinking, okay, we're going to wait until he proves he can do it all year in Toledo this year before we really start going, okay, what is the long-term kind of outlook for this guy? Okay. Next up, we have, I think I have an Isak Paredes question somewhere in here, which I wanted to get to. But I think that when it comes to Paredes, okay, this one's from Tanner. I've seen rumors that the Rays may be selling some pieces. If Paredes is available, how would you feel about the Tigers trading for him? First things first, okay, and this we might only have time for this, and then maybe one more question on this one. When it comes to trading with the Rays, I cannot tell you how, I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but you cannot operate under fear when you run a Major League Baseball team. So the notion that, oh my goodness, the Tigers shouldn't trade with the Rays, I think is absolutely preposterous and ridiculous. And if I found out somehow that the person running a team that I rooted for was scared to trade with another team, I would be furious. You cannot operate that way. The Rays have lost trades before. Okay. I know it's like the thing, and they win a lot of them. Okay. I'm not trying to say they're bad traders. Obviously, they're fantastic traders. But you cannot operate under, okay, we're just going to completely eliminate a trade from like a team from our market to do business with. That is horrible business management, right? That's like if you're playing Monopoly, right? And you have that one friend. We all have that one friend in Monopoly that just refused to trade with anybody. And you were like, all right, dude, this is ridiculous. Like, this isn't even fun because I know that I'd have a perfect, like, I'd have a Monopoly. I have 3, reds if I could just trade with this dude, but he refuses to trade with anybody. And it just is super annoying. So we just sit here and neither of us are going to have any monopolies because he won't trade with me, even though we're clearly good trade partners. Like, that's what that feels like to me in super layman terms. I think it's so ridiculous to just go throughout and, oh my gosh, anytime the Tigers even remotely rumored to do a trade with the Rays, all the replies are just like, don't do it. You're going to get fleeced. You can't do that. I'm so tired of it. And I understand it. I understand the last trade we made with them did not go well whatsoever. I'm not ignorant to, why people feel that way. You can't operate a baseball team like that. So I want to start off with that. When it comes to Paredes specifically, he had success, and we talked about this a lot on this show. I know that Evan Petzold and Mark Gorosh have talked about it a lot publicly as well. I've talked about it with them a lot. Like, he found success because he was pulling and elevating the baseball. And that's been something that Spencer Torkelson did this past year, and he found a lot of success, obviously, in the second half doing it. But Isaac Paredes found his success because of that. And when it comes to sustainability of that, I think that there is somewhat of a fear of, like, is he going to be able to just do this forever? Because I don't want to call him a one-trick pony, because that's very much not true and, like, is a huge disservice to what he did. But when a vast majority, and, like, he draws walks, he controls the zone. Again, it's not exclusive to just, like, he's only good because he pulls and elevates. There's so much more into hitting than just that. But because that is where a massive uptick in his success came from, there is something to be said for, like, is this going to be sustained the next 3 to 5 years? And the Rays don't pay anyone ever. And so I think that there is a market for them to, I mean, clearly they traded Glass now, right? Like, the ball's already kind of rolling there. Ball's rolling. When it comes to the Tigers trading for Paredes back, I feel like people are going to be, if that trade was announced tomorrow, Isaac Paredes returns to the Tigers. And at first, the return the Rays got, what the Tigers gave up, was not announced, I think people would be pumped. And then I think people would get the return and immediately become upset. I think the general, I mean, he was like a 3.5 win player last year. He was a middle of the lineup hitter for a Rays team that was really good. Like, he had a good year, a dang good year. This isn't like you give up Matt Manning and Akil Baddoo and you get Isaac Paredes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You're going to have to give up legitimate talent. This isn't like Sawyer Gibson Long either. This isn't like Reese Olson straight up. This is like, you are going to have to get, this is a guy who, again, middle of the lineup, like 30 home run power now we're seeing, and has what, 2-3 years of team control left. This is not a walk in the park value-wise. So I think people would be surprised to learn, like, what the asking price for Paredes is going to be if he is moved. Now, if he gets traded to the Pirates and they get him for a bag of potato chips, then we'll come on here and be angry together. And I'll admit that I was wrong, like I always try to do. But I think it's going to be a price tag that when you heard it, if we were to hear it, we would be very hesitant to pull the trigger on. That's all. Good player, would be a massive upgrade. Wouldn't be upset with Isaac Paredes playing third base for the Tigers the next 3 or 4 years. Certainly not. But it's not going to be cheap. Okay? That answer took quite a while. So that's going to be where we end it today. Again, I'm going to get through as many of these as possible. We have so many still great conversations to have. Some about Riley Greene, more about Riley Greene, rather. Some about, like, the Torque Greene, Carpenter, Keith type of scenario. I mean, the certain players to keep an eye on, free agency questions. There's still so many. You guys really blessed me with a lot of fantastic questions to talk about. So we will get into the rest of those on Wednesday's show, and then we'll get out through as many as we can then, and then maybe we just continue it. Maybe this is just Mailbag week. We'll see what happens. And then obviously if a move happens, that will take priority and we'll kick the can down the road. All right? I appreciate y'all. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Wednesday. Like I said, I appreciate you all so much. And thank you for the continued support, even in, the dead part of the offseason. It really does forever mean the world to me. Okay. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you on Wednesday, baby. Go Tigers.